And we are live. Welcome, 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 good folks. I know that people are coming in, so we want you to join us. I'm going to let folks trickle in for the next couple minutes. I want to invite you to jump in the chat, tell us where you're calling from, put your name, and then tell us, what are you doing? What are you up to right now to pour into your community? So we'd love to hear y'all drop in the chat. Tell us where you're from. Tell us who you are. And we're going to give folks a minute to kind of get in the building. Welcome. Let's see who we got. Welcome from Kalamazoo, Salt Lake City, Clinton, Massachusetts. What part of Massachusetts is that? I'm not sure. But don't forget to drop in there what you're up to. We want to know what you're up to in your community right now. What are y'all up to? Welcoming your new neighbors. Thank you, Christy from Maryland. Martha in North Virginia is doing indivisible protests, doing meals to homeless shelters. Pat in Fonskin, California is doing rapid response and anti-detention organizing. Get into it. I love that. Shout out to rural Boone, Iowa. We love our rural organizers. I am also from a rural community, and I know the trials and tribulations of organizing in rural landscapes. Dana in Jersey City is doing food security work, working on opening a visitor center for families of detainees. I love that. Shout out to you, Dana. Shout out to No Wrong Door, who's doing laundry assistance and harm reduction outreach. Robin looking to support local communities that need support, spending some money in the local communities. That's what's up. Welcome, all of you. Welcome everybody. I'm going to jump in. My name is Tamika Middleton. If you have been on a Women's March call before, you've probably seen my face. I'm going to try to say this, y'all. Just FYI, heads up, folks. I just had oral surgery last week and my mouth is kind of wonky. So if the words aren't coming out right, please forgive me. Allow me a little bit of grace this evening. But I am the Chief Political and Strategy Officer at Women's March. And I'm so grateful to be with y'all and to be with this amazing crew of folks who is going to be organizing this training for us this evening. Please continue to introduce yourselves to each other, to us. Tell us who you are. Tell us where you're joining us from, because we want to know. We really are interested in where people are building mutual aid projects from. We want to know what you are up to pour into your communities. All right. So please continue to drop that in the chat, even as we move this conversation forward. So, tech check before we get ahead of ourselves. First things first, this is being live streamed on our Facebook and on our YouTube. If you are looking for captions, if you need captions, live captions are available on our Facebook page, Women's March on Facebook. You can find the live captions. After the video is over, you will be able to find the recording of the videos on both the Facebook and the YouTube page, and YouTube captions will be accessible after the live stream is done. Unfortunately, YouTube does not have capability to do live captions for us. Please, throughout the evening, drop your comments and your questions in the chat on whatever platform you're on. We'll do our best to try to incorporate them in. We have a lot of great material we want to get through today, because when we come back in 2 weeks, we're going to continue to build on that information. So just a reminder, this is a 2-part series. It's not a repeat. It's a 2-part series. So today you'll be getting something different, and we will build on that in 2 weeks. So make sure that, you put your questions in there. We'll try to, if we don't build them in today, we'll try to build them in next week or on the next training. If you have registered for this training, you will get all the follow-up resources and communications. If you have not registered for this training, make sure at the end you get the link to register for the next one, so you can make sure you get all that information, all the links, all the resources, all the tools will come via email to everyone who has registered. And finally, if people who've been rocking with us for a while know that the block hand is strong. So if you are being out of pocket in the comments, if you are spamming the chat, your comments will be limited or you will be removed, because we do want to make sure that this is a space where we can be together and people can be fully in themselves. There is space for us to learn and grow, and also is a baseline requirement of respect in this room. So we thank y'all so much for adhering to all of those guidelines. And yeah, and so I'll keep it pushing. Welcome to It's Giving Feminist Aid training number 1. So before we get into too far ahead of ourselves, before we get into the training itself, I want to give us a little bit of context. This training is not a standalone. Women's March is really working on thinking about how we can help you all have the tools, the resources, the training, the flanking that you need to be able to really land inside of your communities and organizing inside of your communities. And so this training is a 2-part series. And what we will be up to after that 2-part series is we will send you a survey. You'll get one after this one, you'll get one after the next one. In that survey, you let us know, are you trying to build a mutual aid project in your community? And would you like to be inside of the network of folks doing so? After you do that, then we'll be able to build with you. We'll move you into an online space, into a digital space where you can continue to grow and learn and be supported by the organizations that are a part of this effort. So with that said, this is the Women's March is not doing this alone. I have had the great pleasure and honor to build a squad for this project of some of the dopest mutual aid organizers I know. And so y'all get to meet them today. But Building Movement Project, Feed Durham, and Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid Fund are also joining us as a part of this big picture effort. And so we really want you all to go follow all the organizations, right? Follow all the work that everybody's doing and support all the work that everybody's doing, because it's really phenomenal work. And know that if you decide to be a part of this initiative long term, these organizations will be there to support you and to flank you and to help you land and grow your project over time. That is what we're up to. We want to give you the resources, the tools, the foundation, the political understanding to build a project that lasts and that is durable. And so that's what we're going to be in for the next many months, not just these 2 training sessions. So I also get to introduce y'all to our trainers today. So of course there's me, hey, again with the Women's March team. From Feed Durham, we have Katina Parker, who's joining us as a trainer. We also have Adaku Uta joining us from Building Movement Project. And we have Carissa Vaughn joining us from Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid Fund. When they come up, they can share more about themselves. We wanted to get all the things in, so I didn't include bios here. But you'll hear more about them. You'll learn more about them. Feel free to Google them. They're all phenomenal. All right. And then, so getting into the goals of this training. For this evening, what we want to be up to is helping you all understand the roots and lineages of mutual aid and its role in feminist, abolitionist, anti-fascist, and anti-capitalist struggles. We want to share the distinctions between charity, service, organizing, and mutual aid. We want to explore some case studies of feminist-led mutual aid in action. We want to identify local community needs and existing projects. And then we want to begin mapping mutual aid possibilities within your own context, capacity, relationship, region, and community need. The key here that we're trying to be in is we want to be building mutual aid projects. We want to be building politically grounded mutual aid projects that understand what the context and the lineage of mutual aid is, all the ways that we've already been doing it, and what it is we're trying to build, right? Mutual aid is a part of a strategy and a vision of resistance, and we want to be doing that. And also, what we're up to more broadly is building mutual aid at scale. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. So our agenda, what we're in right now, is our welcoming, our grounding, our overview of our time together. Then we'll talk some about what is mutual aid, We'll go into from charity to solidarity and what makes it feminist. Then we'll get into those case studies and learning from the field. We'll really walk you through how to do community mapping. Then we'll get into some reflections and some closing. So that's what we're up to tonight. I want to, before we move, I want to name a couple things. One, I saw a question about whether or not people's pronouns will be respected. We do ask that folks respect people's personhood. That includes all the ways that they want to be defined and named, right? We can respect that in this space. So that is an invitation and ask that we be in that level of respect. And then I know there's some other questions in there. We're going to try to get to them. Some of them are Women's March specific questions that are not related to mutual aid. Feel free to email us at organizing@womensmarch.com. It's organizing@womensmarch.com. So we're so excited to get in. We got over 450 people joining us right now to get trained up. So we're super excited. We're going to jump in to the training. I'm going to pass it over to Carissa.
Hey, everybody. Good evening. Well, it's evening here in Atlanta. Welcome. Thank you. I'm going to do a brief introduction of myself and then just talk about what is mutual aid and why it's political. I am a 20-year resident of Atlanta, Georgia, but come proudly via the Midwest, Minneapolis, Chicago, Kansas City, Missouri. Shout outs. I met some of our organizers and trainers recently, and then I met Tamika years and years ago, homeschooling, also another form of resistance. So today we're talking about what is mutual aid. Tamika actually thoroughly talked about what mutual aid is, and I'm just going to add some points and then go over some definitions. And we can all answer this question with varying answers. So mutual aid is a cooperative way to build people power. It's political because it challenges power structures that often neglect people. It resists normalizing unfair and unjust policies, and it really requires that we depend on each other, and it, how can I say, pushes back against hierarchies of people. My experience that I'll talk more in detail about with Mama Fund has really taught me how to center the most vulnerable and connect with the directly impacted, which includes myself, in different ways. We all have different entries of access. We have different needs. We have different timelines of how we enter mutual aid. So I'm going to talk about that later, and I'm going to go to the next slide and go through some of these definitions. Next slide, please. So you guys can drop in the chat as we go through the definitions what mutual aid is to you. There's just a few definitions that I'm going to read here. Mutual aid is a practice in politics that emphasizes solidarity rather than charity, which one of our trainers is going to talk to more later. But what does that mean? It means that we recognize that our well-being, health, and dignity are all bound up in each other. It means that we understand our survival depends on cooperation, not competition. Another, collaboration, reciprocity, and shared creation define the practice of mutual aid. It was and remains a collective practice of survival for those bereft of the notion that life and land, human and earth, could be owned, traded, and made private property of anyone. Those who would never be self-possessed or envision themselves as, this is for young eyes, acquisitive self-interested proprietors, or measure their life and worth by the ledger of the rent book, or long to be the settler of the master. Mutual aid did not traffic in the belief that self existed distinct and apart and thank you and apart from others, or reverse the ideas of individuality and sovereignty as much as it did singularity and freedom. Okay. What is mutual aid? Mutual aid is the idea that we all have a stake in one another's liberation, and that when we act from that independence, we can share with one another as equals. Charity, by contrast, it is one-sided. One shares excess wealth on one's own terms. Ideologically, charity implies that others inherently need the help, that they're unable to take care of themselves. And last definition I think we're going to look at, a reciprocal system where those that benefit are also feeding back in and supporting others with either services, money, or other value adding measures. And I'll just add, like Tamika said, it's not just direct services. Mutual aid is part of a larger strategy. So while we are attending to our needs, we are attempting and determined and committed to building alternatives that can sustain us. And I'll pass it back to Tamika.
All right. First and foremost, I realized that I didn't really introduce myself besides telling y'all my title, but I do want to say really quickly that I also am based in Atlanta, along with Carissa and one of the founding members of Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid Fund, and also come to Atlanta by way of New Orleans, but originally from rural South Carolina, say the South Carolina Sea Island, St. Helena Island in particular. And so definitely shout out to all the folks who are coming in and joining us from all over. Shout out to all of you. Thank y'all for joining us. Okay, so I want to ground us a little bit. What we are up to, what we are facing right now. And I think especially those of you who are marchers, women's marchers, are very clear that what we are facing right now is the very real encroachment of fascism in this country. We've talked a lot, over time about how, what the signs are that we are seeing, what the parallels are from the rise of fascism in historically in Spain, in Germany, in Italy, to what we see happening right now in the United States, especially as pertain to women, trans, and non-binary folks, right? And so what we are clear about is that one of the things that has been very impactful and successful in fighting fascism across the globe has been feminist strategy and feminist-led movements. And so you see this picture right here, grounding this in the starting point being fascism is destructive for our communities. And when I say our communities, I don't just mean low income communities. I don't just mean the most marginalized communities. I mean all of our communities. Everyone will be impacted. We see what's happening in the Congress right now. We see the decimation of healthcare access. We see the decimation of SNAP and food support access. We are just seeing across the country the mass firings of folks in federal workers, park rangers across the country, right? We're seeing the slashing of supports to farmers. All of these things mean that the social safety net in this country is being decimated. And so what we will have to be up to is building networks and mechanisms for us to be able to support ourselves and for us to be able to support each other. And for us, that is a part for us how we defeat fascism, how we take action every day in support of true democracy, and how we fight back against fascism. And for Women's March, we seeing ourselves as building a feminist force against fascism. Mutual aid is vital to being to building that feminist force and to actually wielding that feminist force towards the end of fascism. Shout out to our board president, Gina Green, getting arrested here. And so there are a few political ideologies. Yes, I see queer folks, disabled folks, all of these folks are being directly impacted by what's happening right now as fascism really continues its march and its sort of encroachment on the government across the federal government, because we already know, many of us who live in some of these states know that fascism has already very much taken hold and captured government in certain states across the country. So in order for me to minimize how much I am talking in the aftermath of the surgery, I'm gonna need y'all to help us out, right? We want to talk about some of these political frameworks that we feel like are at the core and at the root of what we are trying to be up to with how we are building mutual aid projects together. So we see the necessity of mutual aid projects that are inherently anti-fascist. And anti-fascism is an ideology or social movement that stands in opposition to fascist or authoritarian rule. Very simple, very basic, very cutesy, right? What we are up to is ending fascism. And it feels very important to name that there has been a historical trend of demonizing folks who are anti-fascist. And we actually want to be clear that if you are not anti-fascist, what are you up to, right? And so we believe that mutual aid is inherently anti-fascist. And so I would love for folks to drop in the chat. We want y'all to be in conversation with us, in dialogue with us throughout the day or throughout the evening. So drop in the chat ways that you think, that you see mutual aid as being anti-fascist. Chat it up with me, good people. I'm reading some of y'all's comments. Thank y'all for dropping so much of this, of what is happening in the context that y'all are inside of. How do y'all see mutual aid? Non-hierarchical, absolutely, absolutely. Being rooted in care, absolutely. Fascism is not rooted in care, and fascism is inherently hierarchical. In fact, fascism works to create an other. Yes, not nationalistic. Yes, actually, are we unified? How are we building together? How are we being community oriented, as Iris is saying in the chat as well? How are we talking about the humane treatment of all people? Yes, mutual aid defines all people as worthy of survival and flourishing, whereas fascism defines some people as life unworthy of life. Absolutely. Thank y'all so much for that. I'm gonna keep us moving. The next political framework that we are rooting in is the anti-capitalist framework. And so I think often people are kind of scared about, get scared off when we talk about anti-capitalism. And I want to talk about it a little bit, what we mean here. When we talk about anti-capitalism, and to be clear, all of these are definitions that are coming from Tamika. So these are my understandings of these frameworks. Anti-capitalism is a political ideology that offers the notion that a capitalist system harms more than helps societies by feeding inequality and developing marginalized and oppressed classes. Capitalism depends on a capitalist class and a worker class. It depends on those classes being separated and distinct. It depends on folks having less. And so mutual aid says we are sharing. We are working together. We are not building a system in which there are some people who have and the rest of us work to get access to the things they want to give us, right? We are working just to get the things that we have made, and someone else is profiting off of our labor. So we'd love keep going in the chat. How is mutual aid anti-capitalist? I see Colleen has already gotten into it, sharing resources instead of hoarding for the benefit of the few. Capitalism requires an us over them attitude. Yes, capitalism is competitive. It requires us to compete. It requires worker to compete against worker. It requires us to live inside of a scarcity mindset. I'm gonna keep pushing. Abolition. This is the longest one. I apologize. It's at my heart, so that's that's where it is. That's why it's longest. And I think there's also a lot of misconception about what we mean when we talk about abolition. Abolition is both a political vision and a practice that envisions and builds a world that does not rely on policing, prisons, or their supporting structures, and rather asserts instead that addressing the root causes of crime, violence, etc., are better and more sustainable solutions than the wholesale caging and disappearing of communities. Abolition says we can do better than locking people up. We can do better than throwing people away. We can do better than the death penalty. We can create communities where we do not have harm, or where we have better solutions to harm. I would love for folks, how is mutual aid get to this? How does mutual aid speak to this? I would love for y'all to be in the chat. Reciprocal and inclusive, a gift-giving society like Burning Man. If people are building each other up, we can't be torn apart and manipulated. Get into it. Yes. We must all, yes, no one is better or more than one another. Building longer tables, not higher walls. I love it. There's a quote from Asada Shakur. If you didn't get into our free American Study session on abolition, I suggest you get into it. But one of my favorite quotes I learned doing abolitionist organizing is a part of a poem by Asada Shakur. She says, "A wall is but a wall and nothing more at all. It can be broken down." And so I believe absolutely in how we are breaking down those walls and thinking about what we can build instead. All right, and the last framework we're going to talk about is feminism. Welcome to Women's March, y'all. Feminism is a political ideology, practice, and a movement that fights to dismantle patriarchy and end its subjugation of all women and non-binary people. Feminism says, what are the systems that are subjugating people who are not men and that are creating an oppressive class in the hierarchy based on gender, and how do we dismantle it? For all folks, right? For all of our folks, how do we dismantle it? And so I would love for people to jump in about how you see mutual aid as being feminist. And yes, mutual aid builds solidarity and works against fear that supports fascism. Yes, yes, yes. Less crime because basic needs are met. Exactly. That is really at the root of abolition, right? Is that if we address the root causes of crime, then we can actually have less crime, right? Why are people committing crime? They're poor. Okay, people are, I ain't gonna tell no stories. I'm gonna stop. Capitalism depends on people constantly consuming, but every capitalist wants to pay its own workers as little as possible. Exactly. How can we build mutual aid projects that disavow that? Gender role of women, historically caretaking. How do we actually think about feminist labor, domestic labor, the caretaking labor as actually valuable and worthy, right? And not invisibilized and minimized, right? All right. So we want to ground ourselves in those things because those are the kinds of mutual aid projects that we're trying to be about. When you are thinking about and building mutual aid projects, think about how you are building a project that is anti-capitalist. Think about how, and not just in that it doesn't support capitalism, but that it is actively anti-capitalist. It is actively dismantling capitalism. How are we actively dismantling fascism as we build out our mutual aid projects? Okay, I'm gonna be quiet now, and I am going to pass it back over to Carissa, who's gonna walk us through some of the history of mutual aid.
Thank you, Tamika. Yeah, I really enjoyed learning from the chat box and seeing some of the questions. So I'm going to go to some old historical examples of mutual aid. We're just going to do some back to the basics about mutual aid, where and mutual aid has been practiced since as long as humans were around. And I'm going to talk about some Black mutual aid organizations and societies, but definitely acknowledge Indigenous and peoples of color all over the world. So just to keep it brief, the first organization I'm going to talk about is the African Union Society, which was founded in Newport, Rhode Island. Let me know if you've heard about this, you know about it, you studied it, you read about it. Not yet. Okay. So this and other similar organizations were founded as a response to benefits denied to freed and enslaved persons. So in 1770, the Rhode Island General Assembly prohibited free Blacks and enslaved peoples from interacting, and the punishments were fines or even indentured servitude. This limited socializing and community building. In 1784, the Gradual Emancipation Act also punished families for interacting, punished freed Blacks and slaves from interacting even if they were related to each other. So if a family member was able to purchase the freedom of one family member but not the others, interacting and socializing crazily, illogically was punishable. So the African Union Society provided memberships to free Blacks and limited memberships to enslaved persons, and it served as a cultural center. Later on, it developed into a church, but before that, it provided services like recording births, deaths, and marriages, providing financial help to families impacted by sickness and death, and connecting surrounding communities with free Black people to build community power. A lot of these organizations were built to restore the dignity of families, to allow communities to build and create structures that served them. Kind of another organization was the Female African Union Society. It was created by some members of the society that I just mentioned, but it was also focused on clothing, feeding, and the education of women and children. Excuse me. We can think about the Black Panther Party as a mutual aid organization. Many people think about the Black Panther Party and their free breakfast program for school-age children, but they had over 20 free, what they called survival programs. And this is important to note because the survival programs included a free ambulance program. It included health advocates that would go door to door through communities to find out, hey, what kind of health issues are people facing? People would get tested for preventable diseases. Advocates would accompany community members to specialists. And this was based on the distrust of the healthcare system. The Black Panthers started a school. And I'm mentioning this as a survival program because the Black Panthers explicitly stated that these are not solutions to our problems. These are ways that we survive while we analyze and strategize for larger solutions. Just checking the chat. So when we talk about mutual aid, sometimes it's not a formal organization, but just practices of our everyday lives. These are the meal trains that are organized when families are facing transitions in the beginning or ends of life, or moving from a job, or moving to a new home, or we also, excuse me, we also think of undervalued care work that's kind of invisibilized and not mentioned. It's underpaid or not paid, but it uplifts the families and the communities that we live in. Mutual aid, communal living, people providing homes for their extended families and their neighbors, people holding hands during times of grief and celebration. So mutual aid, while often a formal organization. Thank you. Thank you. It's mainly interwoven in our lifestyles and our communities. And I'm going to pass it 1 second.
Sending you love, Carissa. I hope you get some water to nourish you in the ways that you need. Hey, comrades. My name is Adaku Uta. I use all pronouns. I'm currently beaming to you all from Lenni Lenape land, also known as Edgewater, New Jersey, by way of Lagos, Nigeria, where I was raised. I come from two incredible, brilliant, awkward parents who are also war survivors of the largest civil war in Nigeria, where over 2 million of our people, Igbo people, were killed at the hands of genocide. And I would not be here today without the lineages and the legacies of mutual aid that my family, my lineage has used over time to support their own survival, to support their own learning, and to support their own interdependence. And I feel really fortunate that I have been doing organizing, movement facilitation, abolitionist healing work for a little over 2 decades, primarily in healing reproductive and racial justice movements. Most recently, I was the organizing director at the National Network of Abortion Fund. Shout out to any abortion funds in the building. And right now I work at the Building Movement Project. We're a national capacity building organization working to support nonprofits and movement organizations through resources, relationships, and really, really insightful research, and also have the honor of getting to teach with my dear friend Tamika at Black Organizing for Leadership and Dignity, which is a national organization trying to build a powerful and coordinated Black left. And y'all, I'm so humbled to get to be here with you. There is so much tugging at our attention right now, and you chose to be here, which in itself is a choice to move towards community and think about really deeply or get curious about what are the ways that we can build the ecosystems of care that we might need so that we can all exist into the future. So I want to say thank you deeply for your presence and all the wisdom that you're already, the chat is live, y'all. Thanks for all the wisdom that you're dropping into the chat, and also all the wisdom that you already know about what it means to build mutual aid in this time. And your questions are also welcome and celebrated here. So we're going to move into a section of the training where we offer some distinctions around mutual aid and charity. Unfortunately, as with most words, each word has like different meanings depending on context, people, place. And we really want to break down when we say mutual aid, what it means, yes. And Carissa and Tamika have done a really, really good job at that. But also create distinctions between mutual aid and charity, mutual aid and service, so that we're not conflating not only the definitions together, but also we're not conflating the strategies together, because how we understand the work will impact the kind and quality of the work that we do, and more importantly, the kind and quality of the relationships that we build through the work. So off the bat, would love to hear, what are some misconceptions that you've heard about mutual aid? Drop it into the chat. What are some common myths that you've heard about mutual aid? We've been hearing about what is mutual aid, what you understand about it. I'm curious about the myths that you've heard, or maybe even the myths that you have confused mutual aid with being. So much good stuff in the chat. Thank you for repping all this history. I see people who are retired and still doing the necessary work that needs to be done. You understand this assignment is lifelong. I appreciate you. Yeah. Dania is talking about how people are not talking about mutual aid right now, which in some ways can be a myth, depending on where you are currently located. Any other myths and misconceptions that people have heard or have had about mutual aid? Yes, Cindy hit the nail on the board. I don't want to say on the head because we don't want to do that, but yeah, that it's only about giving, that it is modern term communism, that all asks and few offers. The mutual aid is unreliable because it's situated in community. You only give, like mutual aid is only an extension outward, and it's not something that you receive back to yourself or back to your communities. Lorraine, shout out to you being new, and shout out to all the newbies that are in the building. Wherever you are with your learning is where you are, and we welcome you whether you're a beginner or an expert. So keep them coming. I want to go over 3 main myths that we tend to see in this work around mutual aid. So the first one, which actually got populated a couple times in the chat, is that mutual aid is just about helping people. And yes, in a lot of ways, mutual aid is one, seeing that people do need help, and then moving beyond yourself to support and help people who are blood or chosen, who are in your community or outside of your community. And what we want to expand this myth is, if we go to the next slide, shout out to Tamika who's holding down the slides and facilitating post-surgery. My gosh. We want to keep coming back to mutual aid is not charity, but it is an active practice of solidarity. It is a collective process. It is a set of collective practices where we are centering the wisdom, the skills, the resources that our communities have, and not just offering direct service or meeting the urgent needs of our communities, but also working to organize and shift the way that power lives in our communities so that we are interrupting harm. We are creating alternative structures for people to live their lives on their own terms. And we are building a depth of connection that allows for folks to feel more free in their bodies, more free in their communities, and more free in the ecosystems that they're part of. The next myth that we often tend to hear is that it's temporary, that we only can locate mutual aid within a crisis moment or a flashpoint. And that is the only place that mutual aid can thrive or grow or even exist in for its full maturation. And what we know, and we've heard over and over again, is that while mutual aid might emerge in a moment of crisis, it doesn't only get to exist there. We actually want to situate mutual aid as a practice of how we choose to live our lives with each other. So this is continually being concerned, committed, and connected to the well-being of ourselves and one another, and doing this work for generations. So not just in this flashpoint moment of the new Trump administration, not in this new flashpoint moment where the Department of Education just fired half of its staff, or this flashpoint moment where migrants, folks who are queer and trans, are being criminalized. We don't just focus our attention on this particular moment, but really thinking about, for the next generations, how do we want to make sure that care is extended for a lifetime? Yeah. And then the third myth that we often hear is that anyone can do mutual aid in the same way. And yes, there are many people have the capacity to do mutual aid. And in this space, what we want to do is to invite that capacity to be able to do mutual aid. And we also want to name that mutual aid is not a copy and paste form of loving and being with our community, that in actual fact, mutual aid is shaped by context. It is shaped by our collective histories, where we come from, where we're headed. It is shaped by the lands that have raised us, and the quality and depth of relationships that we have. It also requires so much trust, so much accountability, and so much specificity around what our communities needs are, so that we are not just moving from our egos, or we're not just moving from what white capitalistic, patriarchal, fascistic imperialism would have us move, but we're actually moving in concert with our people in a way that not only honors the wisdom of our communities, but also grows the wisdom of our communities and the conditions that our communities need to be free. So 3 myths there. There are more. And keep going. You're right on. We feeling each other, Tamika. We feeling each other. 3 myths. There are more. And there are more distinctions too that we want to lift up, so that you have the capacity to assess for yourself, whether it's a project that you're thinking about starting, a project that you're currently started or a part of, or a project that you're seeing in your community. Here are a few things, 9 possible sites that you can look to determine, is this project more charity focused? Is this project more mutual aid focused? All right. So the first 3 places that we look at are, what's the power structure? What are the quality of the relationships? How are decisions made? A number of you, because you're brilliant and also have a lot of experience, have dropped this into the chat, that a charity model is often very hierarchical, very top down. There's a quality of saviorism where somebody is coming in with a lot of power, a lot of resources, saying that I have something to give you that you all want. And a lot of the decision making is sequestered or just isolated to the organization or a set of donors who are giving away funds. Mutual aid, on the other hand, is deeply, deeply relational and rooted and grounded in community and shared struggle. And who gets to hold power and wield power, hopefully, are the community members who are involved with the project itself. A couple of other distinctions that you might want to look at, or a couple of other places to look for to assess is this charity centered? Is this mutual aid centered? Is around what's the resource flow? What's the time frame of the project? How are we as a people analyzing the problem that the mutual or the project is helping to support? So charity, again, there are oftentimes binaries on who has and who doesn't have. It's often very temporary response focused on the crisis moment. And when a charity project looks at the problem, it often focuses the problem on what the individual has done, what's the personal feeling that person has done to arrive at this place of harm, of disconnection, of not having the resources that they need. Mutual aid, on the other hand, I love this word of osmosis, like this interdependence, this flow, this exchange of we, Ubuntu, which is a Bantu word. I am because we are because I am. We all exist or coexist in order to create more interdependence amongst us. And rather than just focusing on a flashpoint, mutual aid is really, really committed to the future, committed to generations, really our lives, and how we choose to live it in concert and connection with one another. And then again, really, really interested in disrupting not only the status quo, but shifting the way that power lives within us and within our communities. And then the last few to look at around distinctions. What's the political stance? Who are we accountable to? And what does it take for this project to be sustainable? So in a charity model, folks would be like, we neutral over here. We don't have a political stance. And if somebody tells you that they are neutral, please run the other direction. I don't think there's anything, I don't think there's any way to be neutral in this ever, really, politically. But again, yes, oftentimes a charity model tends to maintain the status quo, to be more accountable to donors or specific regulations, and is really dependent on ongoing charity in order to exist, and particular charity that's coming from a small fractal of people. And mutual aid, on the other hand, again, is seeking structural change, is holding accountability to the community, particularly folks who are most impacted by the harms being faced inside of community and society at large, and is really working to build the collective muscle of self-determination so that we are able to govern our own lives and also govern our own communities. So if you're considering right now, well, what is our project doing? Those last slides, those 9 core distinctions around accountability, sustainability, political stance, time frame, you can use that as a guide around accountability to see, like, where does your project fall? Is it more charity? Is it more mutual aid? And here's a few examples. And we're lifting up these examples not to pedestal any particular project. No one project is perfect. Every project that we're going to mention on this, in this conversation, in this webinar, has its flaws and has its gifts. And what we're trying to really distill here is the lessons that we can learn from all of these projects. And also, in particular, with these examples, core distinctions around projects that might be more charity focused, projects that might be more mutual aid. So a couple of examples of charity-based projects might be food banks that have really, really intense income restrictions, or just focusing on getting housing for individuals. Again, important things to do. I don't want to knock at all that charity is not important. And there are ways that charity and also mutual aid can be done that can be really, really harmful. And then some examples of mutual aid might be a mutual aid fund that is community controlled. Projects that are actively organizing to make sure that housing is a human right for all. Yeah, so a couple of examples, and y'all are dropping. I see examples from Teresa of Villa Park and the with LGBTQ folks. I saw some folks up top who are talking about elder communities and the ways that people are taking care of each other in nursing homes. So keep dropping those examples. I think they're in particular helpful for people who might never have done a mutual aid project and want to know more examples of how they exist. So if we go to the, yes, Tamika and I are in sync. Again, so why are distinctions important in life and with mutual aid projects? One, if we are not clear about what it is that we are doing, it will impact people's safety. It will impact whose labor is valued. It will impact whose voices get heard. And sometimes when we are not clear on our distinctions, we can lie to ourselves about what we're doing and end up causing harm in the long run. Sometimes if we're not clear about distinctions, especially in charity, we can create a scenario where oppressive systems become more tolerable, but we're not actually shifting the root causes of why these forms of violence exist in the first place. So it can sometimes leave us complacent to only doing just enough when we can do more, as Tamika said. And I think the other really important reason, y'all, we only have so much time. We only have so much time to do a lot of work and really to live our precious lives. And I don't know about y'all, but with the time that I have left in this life as a 41-year-old, I really want to be extending my energy towards liberatory approaches rather than replicating harm or replicating the status quo that is taking more away from our communities than we have to. What makes it feminist, y'all? So there's a lot of mutual aid projects out there in the world. A lot of mutual aid projects popping up. And we are, one, reclaiming the mutual aid lineage and trying our best as possible, not only to make it feminist, but to make it anti-capitalist, to make it anti-fascist, to make it abolitionist. And just to reiterate a couple of points that were offered earlier, is that a mutual aid project becomes more feminist when it is rooted in community care rather than just personal responsibility and taking care of individuals. When we are centering consent and boundaries and we're not coercing people in order for them to get the care that they deserve. When we are focusing on interdependence and not hyper-individualism like capitalism teaches us. When leadership is distributed and there isn't a hierarchical, charismatic leader that has the light, the resources, the attention, the capital. And at the core, that the wisdom of who is holding and moving this work is really situated in folks in our communities who are most impacted. Okay. So key things to remember there around distinctions. Pay attention to the who, the how, where the resources and the relationships are flowing, where power and position lies, the quality of how power is wielded to make change, and what kind of change is possible when you're looking at whatever projects that you might be holding to assess whether it is mutual aid or whether it is charity or whether it is something else, okay? So with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Carissa and Katina, who are gonna share some really powerful, dynamic case studies of this work on the ground.
Just waiting for Katina. Oh. Well, I can start talking about Mama Fund if we want to go to those slides, and we can come back to the discussion between Katina and I. So I'm going to get started. I'm sure the slides will catch up. I am going to talk about the history of the Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid Fund, which Tamika mentioned she's also a founding member of. There we go. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid Fund, also known as Mama Fund, is 5 years old. We took a two-pronged approach to mutual aid. We started with a rapid response community fund, a mutual aid fund, and then we phased into time banking. We started at the onset of COVID, right after, actually before lockdowns were required. The post that you see online was actually written by Tamika after the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic. Tamika actually mobilized an online community response Facebook group. And in that group, she wrote this post recognizing that there will be at least short-term economic impact. Are there folks organizing or interested in a community loan fund or SUSU situation? And she wrote this March 15th, 2020. And I want to say the next day, I'm almost positive the next day, she mobilized a Zoom call. There were several responses, probably like 40, 50 responses saying, yes, I'm interested. The reason that I really wanted to talk about this quote is because Tamika asked, are there folks organizing? And I think those check-ins are really important. One, because oftentimes there are already people doing the work that we can support or we can reinforce. We also want to find out if there's value alignment. We also want to find out lessons learned, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So I'm going to tell you how Mama Fund has progressed from there to here, and answer a couple of questions in the chat. Can we go to the next slide, please? If you can you please make the slide a little bit bigger? If not, that's okay. Thank you so much. So at the meeting the very next day, there were organizers, there were individuals. It was a pretty open meeting. It was pretty kind of heavy. A lot of us didn't know each other. I hardly knew anybody on the meeting, and some of us did know each other. And we started kind of naming needs that we had, needs that we've seen, needs that were posted in the community resource group. Some of those, somebody mentioned an older couple couldn't afford a 24-pack of water, and they kind of elaborated on how a lot of people were stockpiling things for resources for COVID emergencies, but just didn't have the transportation or the money to do so. People were quarantining in dangerous homes. Black, queer, and trans folks had no access to doctors. People were afraid that evictions would happen. People didn't have funds to relocate. People were getting, already caught up in late fees and, not having first and last month's rent. People were living in their cars and their homes. This was already the landscape in Atlanta and across America. There was a lack of support for folks who were already in trauma, suffering from mental health issues or physical health issues. People were already experiencing reduced work, gig work, inconsistent work hours and income, and that was exacerbated by the pandemic. Gender-based violence resources were needed. Again, transportation, and then someone mentioned a discrepancy in higher education and low-wage workers. So a lot of the lower-wage workers were required to come back to work, and there were positive cases. So a lot of these needs were crisis-based, and a lot of them were just everyday needs that people were experiencing. Can you go to the next slide, please? As we talked about what we were going to do, what would benefit us, we talked about the need for something that was rapid response and a long-term solution. This was before any of the checks came, any of the stimulus checks came, and we knew right away people already had negative bank accounts. People were already living check to check or worse. So we knew that a mutual aid fund could assist that, but it wouldn't be a long-term solution. Mama Fund raised close to $1 million, actually a little bit over $1 million, and most of it was neighbor-to-neighbor funding. So people were contributing $5, $10, $30. Excuse me. We also had people, allies, having their friends gather money or having yard sales and contributing money. Again, a lot of us didn't know each other, so we really had to take the time to talk about our values, talk about our grounding principles, talk about how we wanted to have the application process be low barrier and not re-traumatize people. And we also had to talk about how we wanted the solidarity groups to be aligned with us. I'll get to the long-term alternative, the time bank, later on. Can we go to the next slide, please? Mobilization was immediate. We had a group of committed volunteers, and I want to emphasize that no one was getting paid for this work. People were working 20, 30, 40, 50 hours a week, locked in on Zoom calls Monday through Friday, morning, afternoon, and night, excuse me, trying to raise money, get comms out, get the application out, go ground in a application process where we can move funds quickly and raise funds. So just weeks after the pandemic was declared, probably not even a month later after we formed, we had raised and redistributed $44,000, excuse me, in urgent funds to 75 families and 300 BIPOC. And these are some of the language that were spoken by our mutual aid fund members. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll look at those. One thing that I want to say about our thank you. One thing that I wanted to say about our application is that we had priority groups. We have priority groups. We still give funds out, even though we're more focused on time banking. And we really centered marginalized populations. We really focused on domestic violence survivors, trans and non-binary people, formerly incarcerated, unhoused persons, immunocompromised, single mothers and children. We also made sure, excuse me, that people who lived in the same household, maybe different families in the same household, could still both apply. We gave repeatedly. We asked people to pay back into the fund when and if they could, or consider time banking. We did get a lot of support after the protesters, and I want to, acknowledge them. We had community allies. And we also, another important note, early on, we didn't have any type of infrastructure at all. So what became our fiscal sponsor, which is the Organization of Human Rights and Democracy, volunteered their services to support the Cash Apps and the Zelles and the checks that were sent out. We really had a committed collective of volunteers. As we started growing, we did need some help, and we did hire some administrative people. We put the application out to our members, to our community fund members, and they applied. And actually, one of our first staff members was, excuse me, one of our community fund members. So we have tried to stick with our grounding principles throughout the last 5 years, and we've had to deny funding. We early on said that if a company wanted to give us funding, but they weren't treating their employees, fairly, we didn't accept that. We were really strategic about making sure that the people that gave into the fund were aligned with our values. I don't have the exact number, but we have raised and redistributed about $900,000, probably more now. I don't have the exact numbers. Excuse me. And really, we have to show appreciation to the community who were giving $5, $10, $15, $30. Can we go to the next slide? So we have always talked about time banking. In our initial applications, when we were asking people, what is it that you need? What are the funds that you need right now? We also asked them, what can you give? What kind of skills and gifts and resources do you have to offer to your community? And what do you need for your community? And we've had all kinds of responses, really beautiful responses. But of course, at that time, there were no in-person meetings. So we had to just stay connected online, stay connected through a little bit of phone banking or storytelling. And we received beautiful shares and, some really sad shares. In the last couple of years, we have had these in-person meetings where we've invited people to join us in time banking. Katina and I are going to talk a little bit more about time banking later on, but this is a picture of an event that we hosted last month here in Atlanta. And these are guided conversations. Shout out if you've ever participated in Offers and Needs Market. But these are guided conversations where community comes together to kind of share their strengths, share their resources, share their gifts, and then get vulnerable and share their needs. And we've watched people connect in real time. to build relationships, host community dinners, or talk about, homeschool or childcare exchanges, helping each other find income, offer legal services, ride shares, moving services. I mean, it's just been an amazing experience to be part of all of these offers and needs markets and see strangers connect or friends reconnect. So we've invited people to join us on a time banking platform. While we still do give mutual aid funds out, we are really trying to build relationships in our communities. And I think Katina's going to talk about Feed Durham.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Katina. I'm a founder and steward for Feed Durham. We came together in 2020 due to mounting hunger in the area, of course, because of COVID. And since 2020, we've fed a little over 200,000 people, mostly from my front yard. We started out by cooking. And I should say, Feed Durham came about due to a bunch of different experiences in my life converging. Prior to COVID, I used to host an annual barbecue. Once shutdown became an obvious aspect of our future, I wanted to figure out how to carry that forward. My daughter, we'd also started volunteering at the local mission because she was interested in helping unhoused people. And then my own background, I grew up in a small all-Black town in Oklahoma called Green Pastures, and we never went hungry. We were always in pretty good clothes, and we didn't realize we were poor until we left the city. And to this day, I study with many of those biological aunties and community aunties, and I support them in the work that they're doing in the community. However, I live in Durham now, and I bring a lot of that principle here to the work that I do. We started with these massive cookouts, and that tradition specifically came from Mama Cat in Ferguson and also Mama Winona in Standing Rock. Mama Cat would come out to Ferguson PD and cook every Sunday for the protesters. And then Mama Winona, if you went to Standing Rock, was legendary. Everybody would say you have to go to her kitchen. I'm very involved in the anti-state violence movements here in Durham and beyond. I work as a filmmaker and saw numerous times where people who were protesting took food from strangers, took water from strangers, and understood that was a vulnerability, and knew that we needed to prepare for a time when, like now, basically. And so Feed Durham was about a lot of things, but mainly for me, it was about supporting my community and building out hardiness and learning a bunch of different skill sets that would help us survive what's coming. So the first time we cooked, we aimed to cook for about 1,000 people, and we thought it was going to take 2 days. I think it took us 5. That was April of 2020, and we came back the next month and did it again. That time I want to say we cooked for 1,500, and by then we had tightened the process. And in 2020, I think we cooked six times. By the end of the year, we had people coming in to study with us from Chicago and Baltimore and Charlotte, namely Richmond, though, and also Atlanta. The focus of our cooking was tasty, nutrient-dense meals, as you can see in this photo. Taking traditional Southern cuisine and making it non-dairy, making it as allergen friendly as possible. And in the process, we trained a bunch of people to cook on pig smokers and griddles and steam pots and burners. I have a friend who teases me and calls it cowboy cooking, and that is what it is. But it means that when the power goes out, we can cook. As long as we have a way to refrigerate our food, and you can run refrigerators off of solar power these days. We cooked for a long time until vaccinations hit, and then our plentiful volunteer base dissipated quickly, and we had to shift. What we shifted towards was giveaways, liberating resources. Many of our volunteers are white or white adjacent, meaning we have access to folks, we have access to folks in rooms that working class people don't typically have access to. And so we shifted to making phone calls to grocery stores, restaurants, so on and so forth, to figure out what they would be willing to part with in exchange for a tax receipt. Typically, that's the arrangement. And as I'm talking through some of the things we did, I want you to understand that these are mutual aid strategies that you can employ in your own communities. Every grocery store, for the most part, those managers have a quarterly chit, if you will. There's a certain amount of money that they can offer to the community in gift cards. And then also when those refrigerators go offline due to electrical outages, that food has to be thrown out. And so if you create relationships with those managers, friendly relationships, you can be the first call when it's time to throw that food out. And instead of having to dumpster dive for it or having to fend off, police so that you can dumpster dive for it, you can pull up with a truck and retrieve that food and take it into the community. With our giveaways, we started mostly with food, and then it just got bigger and bigger. Clothes, plant starts, medicines. We have a relationship with Gaia Herbs, and so on. And then from there, we explored other iterations. Being out in the yard, it became obvious that young people in particular, that there were some disconnects between critical thinking and, quite frankly, common sense. And those of us who are older and have kids understand that a lot of that disconnect is about a lack of tactile skill sets. So we started brainstorming about how do we get the tactile skill sets back into our communities. And when I say we, this is a community-wide effort. This is also a trend nationally amongst certain age groups. They have what are called really, really free markets, and they may call them something else in other communities where people show up and we'll just set up in a parking lot and put things out on a blanket. You can pick it up, you can take it for free. And then also in these spaces, skill shares will be offered. And so those skill shares might be how to switch out your brake lights, how to change your car oil, how to make paper with really pretty flowers, but like pretty much anything that can be taught in a parking lot, people would come and set up and do that. We also started hosting repair clinics to support that need for increased tactile skill set in our communities. And that addressed three areas of concern. One, landfill diversion, but also, like I said, the teaching of the tactile skill sets. And then lastly, freeing up resources for people, meaning like some of us, me and others, will just hold on to like clothes that need to be sewn and a piece of furniture that needs like a little bit of a repair, a small piece of furniture, a big piece of furniture. Well, through these repair clinics, we could take all those things to the repair clinic. And here we have a place called Scrap Exchange. And those things will get repaired on site. And we have the choice of bringing those things back home or giving them away. And most of us would just give it away to people who actually needed it. And, since 2021, 2022, we have continued to explore different iterations. In our current iteration, most of our work is encouraging folks to grow food for one another, and building out pallet gardens for hundreds of people, for thousands of people, sharing the plans so that hundreds of thousands of people will build out pallet gardens for one another. We have gone all the way down the pallet garden wormhole. I can tell you all about heat-treated pallets. There are 4 kinds: HT, heat-treated, KD, kiln-dried, DB, debarked, and EPAL, European pallets. Those are the kind that you want. They're often available for free behind stores. Pharmaceutical companies and motorcycle companies and wineries get what we call first run pallets, meaning they're used once and then they go into secondary markets. I say all this to say that for a little less than $150, you can help a family establish a garden for themselves, and they can grow food for the entire growing season, like all 3 or 4 growing seasons, depending on what zone you live in. And we've also gone down the wormhole of burlap, because to build out pallet gardens, you need access to burlap, ideally free. You can obtain that from coffee beaneries, also wineries. And with those burlap bags, especially the pretty ones, you can turn them into container gardens. And then there's bucket gardening. Like there's so many different iterations of like how we can create and grow food for one another. But the bottom line is that we need to be growing a lot, like a lot, so that we can fill in the gaps when supply chain becomes inconsistent, which could be as early as this fall. These days, we also do a lot of skill shares. Tomorrow, we're hosting a skill share, plant medicine. Let me get the words right. It's an emergency plant medicine for flood relief skill share. We got flooded last week, not once, but twice. Durham, Chapel Hill, um, Carborough, and beyond. And a lot of the relief workers are requesting tinctures and teas that bring calm, de-stress, um, bring down inflammation, and also relieve sore muscles. And so tomorrow, we'll have about 40 people in my yard breaking down tinctures and teas. We have several herbalists that volunteer with us, and then several other herbalists in the community that donated physical resources so that we could do this work. Tomorrow, Wednesday, is actually a day that I established um, about 4 months ago. You know, myself and some other folks started hosting weekly events, and in the interest of creating something we call murmuration, it occurs naturally in nature, amongst kinship groups, and in anticipation of a time when the power goes down, or they disrupt the internet, or whatever they do to disrupt our communication. The idea is that we are already in a pattern, and there's because there's something that we do every day, every week, same day, same time, same place. So for our event, it's 5 p.m. For the time being, it's at my house, and by my house I mean my yard, the exterior of my yard, not the interior of my house. And every week on Wednesdays at 5, rain or shine, we get together and we have a community dinner. There's usually between 20 and 30 people who come out, and we do garden work. Right now, I've got about 17,000 plant starts in my front yard, herbs, veggies mostly, and those plants are always in rotation. We keep sending them out into the community and bringing more plant starts back in. Is that my time?
I think so. But we have a few minutes to chat. So somebody in the chat asked if you could repeat the name of the pallets.
The breakdown, heat treated. So HT, you want to look for an HT marking. DB, well, HT is going to be the most common thing that you'll find. DB for debark, KD for kiln dried, and EPAL for European pallets. The EPAL pallets tend to go to wineries or high-end spaces. And thank you. The reason you want that is because anything else probably has methyl bromide in it, which is carcinogenic. You don't want the blue painted pallets, and obviously you don't want plastic pallets. You also don't want the red painted pallets.
So, Katina, we have about just a few minutes to chat. I know we talked about some discussion questions beforehand. So, if there's one that you want to address, go ahead. But I would really like to know your personal story.
What part would you like for me to share?
The parts, but a big part that inspired you to start.
I didn't want to be here alone. I know how to survive. I come, being from Oklahoma, Texas, that part of the country. We grow up carrying young, and grow up, planting and participating in all aspects of family life pretty young. If you live in a rural area, so I know how to survive, and I know how to thrive during really hard times. And I know that I can go back to my family, but I also know that isolation is the enemy, meaning if I go back home, it'll be good for a little while, but for the skill set and gift that I can offer to the world, in collaboration with people like you and Adaku and Tamika, there's a greater good at hand, and as bad as things are, and as scary as things may seem, I actually think we can come out of this better than we went in, meaning we were leaning away from community. We were becoming too individualistic, too materialistic, too checked out. It's actually how we got here. And now here's a real call where we can deepen relationship with one another. And it's going to be challenging for some, but we can work through old conflicts to get to the other side, and practice, beloved community. So that the history that they're taking out of our schools, it lives in us. It doesn't get erased just because we don't teach it in schools. So if it lives in us, then how do we teach it to one another? How do we teach it to our children, right? And we already have models for that when you look to history.
Thank you. I'm going to spend the next couple minutes, I think I probably have 8 minutes, to talk about time banking a little bit more, just for those who don't know what it is. So time banking is a skills exchange where an hour is exchanged for an hour, regardless of what you're exchanging. And the focus is not to undervalue the labor that is often undervalued. So if you are providing childcare, if you are providing tech services, if you're providing medical service, ride share, teaching, an hour equals an hour of time. It's different from bartering because the exchange does not have to be a direct exchange. So if someone in your community has a service that you want to use, they don't have to get a service from you. They can get an hour of service or however many hours they've put in from anyone in the time banking community. Let me know if you have a question about that. There are also opportunities to do things like what Katina mentioned earlier, like a group skill share. Katina mentioned a repair clinic, I think. So this is also part of time banking. There's that like one to many, where one person is teaching a skill to many people, or there's many to one, where many people might go and help a person build garden boxes, or many people might help clean out a garage or paint a fence. So there's also ways where people just connect to learn things. So you don't have to be an expert in what you're doing, but it's an opportunity to build relationships, build community, and lift the burden off of people. I think that's our time.
Thank you, Katina and Carissa. Deep gratitude for both of you and for all of us. I hope each of you that are listening to the case studies, and there's so many more that we could share, that one thread that you could hear running through all of those stories is just how deeply our folks were listening to what is needed in community right now. Not what they wanted their community to have, but really what did their community most need, and sourcing their offering, their collaboration inside of this mutual aid project from what is needed. And this next piece that we want to go into is about doing exactly this. I see a lot of folks in the chat being like, well, how do I start something this amazing? I have all these different ideas. And the first place that we want to invite you to do, whether you've done it already or you haven't done it before, is to do a community map. And we see community mapping as another important collective practice that is really how do we center the ways that we're able to see, sense, and name what already sustains our communities, what already cares for the people in our communities. What are some of the things that are harming us or getting in the way of us and our people getting access to the care that they need? And how might we cultivate more interdependence amongst us? We also see community mapping as a political act because, one, human beings are the youngest species, but we are also the loneliest species. And part of the design of this fascist empire is to keep us disconnected. And so when we map our communities, when we reconnect, we are choosing not to normalize abandonment. We are choosing to recenter belonging. And we're also choosing to move towards ecosystems that create more shared power, more care for more of us. And what we're hoping that this map helps to reveal for you is not only what exists, but where there are gaps, like where there are gaps that currently exist, where you're from, where there are overlaps in terms of maybe the ideas that you have and what currently exists, where there are opportunities for collaboration and organizing. And more than anything, how can we make sure that we are sourcing from the lived experiences of people who live where you're at? If we go to the next slide, and in particular, how does mapping support mutual aid efforts? Again, not only does it showcase or reveal what exists in our communities beyond what we know or what we think we know about our communities, but it also helps to show who's overburdened, who's over-resourced, who's not as connected. What are some of the power dynamics that currently exist, whether it's in your neighborhood, whether it's in your block, your township, that might need to be disrupted, and then where are there opportunities for more collaboration and shared responsibility. So what we're about to do right now is just to do a quick Mentimeter, and to get a sense of like, what do you already know about your community right now? We'll have about 4 questions to answer together. A Mentimeter is about to pop up. You can go to menti.com, menti.com, and use the vote code 56637086 to get into the Mentimeter. We're going to answer 4 short questions just to see, what do you currently know? And if you don't know anything from these questions, this is an opportunity and an invitation to learn more about what you don't know. So again, go to menti.com. The vote code is 56637086. And we're about to pull up the questions so that we can see the answers populated live. And if we can get this screen a little bit larger, Tamika, thank you so much again for all your back end work. So first question here, y'all. Share one type of mutual aid work that's already happening in your community that you know of. So it could be formal, it can be informal. A number of you were putting in some really incredible examples in the chat. Tutoring, babysitting. Some of you are herbalists in the space and have been donating your medicine. Some of you have been supporting with bail funds. Drop in what you know. What's one type of mutual aid that's already present in the communities that you're a part of? And for some of you, you might be like, I actually don't know because I have not taken the time to look. I've just been so focused on what it is I want to do. And this is an opportunity to get a little bit more curious about what already exists where you are. Again, the site is menti.com, menti.com. And then the code is 56637086. If you're having a hard time, you can just drop your responses in the chat. If you're like, let me just drop it in the chat, that's the easiest thing for me to do right now, you can feel free to do that as well. Dun, dun. One type of mutual aid already happening in your community. Thank you, B, for the affirmation that the information is really useful. I'm going to share a couple of things that I heard already. In addition to the tutoring, the babysitting, I heard free art classes from Keith. I also heard about a ton of repair cafes, including down the street in Jersey City from me. I'm excited to go check that out. I am hearing about folks who Philly has a monthly repair fair that moves from neighborhood to neighborhood, which is so, so exciting. After school programs, folks, Baltimore has Open Works and some tool banks that host several community events. So just want to shout those out as well. There's a shout out to Elizabeth Knight Moss, who pioneered this concept in upstate New York around the repair cafe that is being built in Jersey City. Thank you for developing the skills of our community members. So needed. And it's great to see that this work continues to exist. Shout out to the gender affirming pop-up clothing shops. Let me know where those are so I can come visit. Okay. There might be something happening with the Mentimeter. And oh no, I can actually see responses on my end. For some reason, it's not showing on the larger screen. Actually, no, it's not. It's okay. So let's move to the next question, and we'll just keep popping it out in the chat in case it's easier. Oh, there's a lot here. Okay. So what is one type of mutual aid that you are curious about learning about in your community? There's so much here. A lot of time bank interests, a lot of skill shares. People want to know about what kind of skill shares are happening. What kind of connection is already happening? How are people utilizing their libraries? And what about the community gardens that are happening? I see laundry assistance. I see bail funds you want to know about. And I also see folks really interested in food security. Beautiful. Let's go to the third question here. What's one resource or skill you have that could support mutual aid work? And I believe that every single person here has a skill to offer, even if it's just your listening and your presence around mutual aid work. And the code, again, for people who need it is 5663-7086. And it's menti.com, 5663-7086. A couple of things that I saw in the chat earlier around resources or skills. I heard people who are retired teachers and you want to teach or babysit other folks. I heard another herbalist who was like, I have a bunch of essential oils. Where can I donate my medicine to? I heard that there are artists here who are really, really good at bringing people together to create workshops for joy. I also saw people who do really, really well at creating spaces for people to share not only their time, but also their energy to support cook-offs and to support farming projects. So all of those things and more are so needed. And then the last question here, what is an unmet need or gap you notice in your community? What kind of support is missing? How do you know it's missing? Oh, interesting. It says waiting for presenter. Just change the slide. Sorry about that, y'all. See if it goes now. And if it's not working for you, feel free to drop it into the chat. Your response to the chat will get them there too. Okay. All good, y'all. Some unmet needs that I heard inside of the chat already is spaces for queer and trans folks to feel safer. Community defense for migrants. How are we supporting immigrants right now who are trying to figure out how to create home and belonging where they have lived their whole lives and might not feel as safe anymore? Majik is saying that they are a hands-on healer and do healings for free. That is so generous. Thank you for that. Housing and food, Robin Steph says. Beautiful. We also have a tool library. Deborah, that's amazing. That's so incredible. Feel free, if you have a link to any of the resources that you have or the things that you're already doing, feel free to drop it here so that we know what's happening in this community and also can get connected to it if it makes sense. So we can go back to the slides. Shout out to B. I'm in LA, so helping educate folks on what is happening politically, especially in younger communities that want to help. Thank you so much, B, for that work. So what you all were doing is just a fractal of some questions that are in our community map that we want to share with you. And This map is by no way comprehensive. It has a set of questions that might feel satisfying, and there might be additional questions that you might want to add to learn more about you, the projects that you want to be up to, as well as the kind of project that you might build. The map that we're sharing with you today is a shorter version. There is a much longer, much more detailed version, but for the sake of time and only having this particular moment with you for now, we're definitely doing a part 2 of this training. We're going to share the shorter version of this community map with you. And again, you can feel free to add your own questions as well, or remix it in a way that really is aligned with your community's needs, where you live, and who your people are. So let's actually go to the next slide. Before we begin, it's really important that we are asking ourselves why and who. So who is the we that we are wanting to support? Who's the we that is trying to create this particular project? Who's starting it and why? Why are you all choosing to start this project? Who's being invited to start something like this? Who's also missing and being left out? And a crucial question that I think we need to begin with is, why are we choosing to do this project? Why are we choosing to, I would say, love on community in this way, or be with community in this way? Answering the question of why will reveal who you are accountable to. Some of us are really accountable to our egos and a saviorist complex. Some of us are really committed to making sure that mamas are out of jails. So getting really clear about your why of doing this will really impact the shape of the work that you do. Also, a community mapping process will reveal a lot of information about people in your life and in your community that might need to be private, especially within our current conditions where there's a lot of risk and increased criminalization. We have to be really mindful about how we're collecting information, how we are holding information, and also making sure that whatever information that we're collecting is as protected and confidential as possible. The last one here, which I think is one of the biggest things that tends to cause conflicts as groups are shaping themselves, is groups not being clear about how, not only the purpose of the group, like why are we doing this, but also how are decisions being made? Like who's deciding what kind of fundraising strategy we're going to use, who we're going to be supporting, who you're going to be partnering with, your relationship with different organizations. There's so many different critical decision points that happen in the lifeline of a mutual aid project and a mutual aid practice, that if you're not clear early on around how decisions will be made, how conflicts will be navigated, how you will care for each other to support your sustainability, it will come up along the way. So getting really clear about those things. The next is really learning about your community. So again, who's the community? What is shaping the way that your community currently exists? Where does community currently live in? Like the neighborhoods, the school districts, the watersheds, the transit line. Who is deciding which community gets to exist and which ones don't belong? And also, when we think about community, especially in this technological age, we also need to be thinking about not just physical space, but also virtual spaces. Like how are folks being impacted there, whether they feel a sense of belonging or they are ousted, or criminalized from being a part of the community. Next one that we are curious about is, what do you already know that is sustaining the folks in your community? What mutual aid efforts currently exist, even if it's not called mutual aid. So some mutual aid projects are called bail funds, they're called gift economies, they're called susus, as we talked about earlier. And here are some categories of things that you can look at. This is not comprehensive, but you can look at how are people figuring out how to survive on a daily basis, whether that is through childcare or disability care. How are people accessing housing support? You might look at what kinds of healing practices or ecosystems are available. You might look at Skillshares and the co-ops. How are people choosing to financially support themselves? What are the ways that people are building culture and centering spirit and land in how they choose to live their lives? And if we go to the next slide, when we look at what's sustaining our community, we can ask the questions of not only what is happening, but who is currently involved in that work, where is it happening, who holds the knowledge, and how the culture of it is being shaped. What makes it work? Like, why is it functioning, or why is it being threatened in a particular way? And how do people get connected to this sustaining resource? How do people get connected to it? So that's one bucket. What sustains us? The next bucket is, what are things that are currently or have in the past or might in the future harm our communities? So this can be, and a number of you have named this here, whether it is different kinds of social harms that are impacting queer and trans people, the ways that ableism lives in communities that impact the ways that bodies are able to move through space. What's the rent like? How are people able to navigate the court system? We just had several floods over the last week and a half. I think that's a really great place to look around, like, not only is like, what are the harms that are happening in those communities, but what's the kind of response that people are getting in those communities on a community, institutional, statewide level, or not getting. And if we go to the next slide, some of the questions that we can ask here around harm is, who is impacted? Who's most impacted? What community responses already exist? Where are there gaps that are not currently being filled? And what would interrupting this harm look like? What might it look like? Or what has it looked like? Okay, so that's another bucket, is looking at the way that harm exists. The other big place is checking for power. Who has it? Who doesn't have it? How is power being wielded? And places to look at is the ways, what current institutions exist, how do they function, the economics of a place, who has land, who controls money, who are some of the people in your community who have social capital and are the people who are bringing people together on their land, or are weaponizing that social capital to keep people away from community. And some questions you can ask here around power are, where is power centrally located? Where are people feeling overburdened or under-resourced because of the way power exists? Where is their gatekeeping of resources? Who's hoarding all the resources and keeping it to themselves or with a particular group of people? And where are there opportunities to share power and leadership? Okay, so we just went through, before you begin, what to reflect on. We looked at what sustains our communities, what harms our communities, and we looked at also power. The next one here is, what are our dreams? Like, what are our hopes and dreams for what we see in community? And it might be aligned with something that already exists. It might be something that's new. And as you're imagining interdependence, you might want to imagine it at different scales of time. So over the next 6 months, what's something that we could either start or be a part of strengthening something that already exists? Maybe it's 1 to 2 years. What is the infrastructure skills that need to be developed in order to sustain mutual aid? You could also think beyond that, 5+ years. You could add generations to this scale of planning. What would it look like to actually shift the current state of your community to one that's more self-determined? Okay. And if we go to the next slide, some other questions to ask are, where are there partnerships? And oftentimes, as you heard through all of our stories, actually, in order for the mutual aid project to grow and sustain itself, partnerships were necessary. So what are the necessary partnerships that you need to have in order for not only for your project to grow, but also to keep deepening relationships in your community that are necessary for all of our livelihood. What are the resources that you can continue to share that not only supports sustainability, but also prevents burnout? And you can imagine, and some of you might already be feeling this way or noticing this, is that when you have a generous practice, there can be a lot of needs that you have to figure out how to meet all at once. And inevitably, you will have to prioritize which needs get met when, which for some groups can be a big pain point if you don't decide how to make decisions sooner. And if you aren't clear about your purpose and what your capacity is. One of the big things that we'll explore in our next training is around capacity. It's around sustainability and how to support a team that is working on a mutual aid project together. So yes, Tamika and I are on the same page. The information that you get from your community is precious, is really, really precious, is really sacred, and it needs to be held well. So we need to ask ourselves, who's going to, and control isn't the right word here, but who's going to hold the information, also who's going to share it? What are things that will stay private just to us so that we're not putting more communities or more people at risk if we divulge information? And how does the information that we have not just be a part of collecting data, but how does it also build the community power that's necessary for our people to survive? And if we go to the next slide, we want to remind you, as you use this tool, again, it is not comprehensive. We hope that when you get this tool, whether it's a shortened version, or the longer version, that you can customize it to really work for the work that you all are up to. Yeah, it's a living tool. It is evolving, adapted to your community. And we hope that this tool really helps you to stitch the necessary relationships that you need in order to build what's necessary in your communities. So that's going to be coming. This map is going to be coming to you in your emails. You'll get the shorter version and the longer version for you to use in your communities. So y'all, we have gotten to the end of our time together. And for folks who have stayed on this long, I thank you. For folks who are watching later, thanks for being here. Thank you for your presence. We want to offer a couple of takeaways of our time, and then also share with you what to expect for our next training and some invitations to do between now and the next training that we have. So this training, we got to do a little bit of political education, talk about what is mutual aid, particularly from a feminist, anti-capitalist, abolitionist, anti-fascist lens. We offered some key distinctions around what is the difference between mutual aid and charity. Y'all heard some deeply inspiring case studies that are happening right now in this country, being led by folks on this call, and also folks, y'all were dropping some amazing things in the chat. And then we went through our community mapping tool. So next up, what we would love for you to do between now and the next training, and the next training is going to be in 2 weeks, July 29th, start to do some community mapping in your community, even if you've done it before. Why? Because things have changed. My gosh, things have changed so much in the last week. They have changed in the last year. There will be more things that you need to know about where you are from, where you live, the people that you're connected to. Talk to somebody local, whether it's a neighbor, a family member, a community leader, to see how are they taking care of each other right now. We're going to send you a ton of resources so that you have a couple of things that you can dig into: where to find a mutual aid project, what are mutual aid projects run by queer and trans and non-binary people. We'll send you a bunch of resources that hopefully are helpful for the kind of work that you want to do. And then y'all are brilliant and you have skills to offer. Take a moment to reflect on that. What is something that you can offer right now based off of what you have. It might be organizing, it might be cooking, it might be taking care of children, it might be healing. Shout out to all of you and the skills that you have. The next training that we're going to be doing, July 29th, is going to be focusing on 4 core things. So we'll do more work around creating a mutual aid project and practice in your community. And then we'll go into some nitty gritty about the logistics. How do you support safety? What are the roles? How do we shape boundaries in this work? And then we'll talk about what does it mean to not only start a project, but sustain this work over time, and not just sustain the work, but also sustain the people who are holding it. Women's March will also share a bunch of really incredible resources that you can use to support you as you are developing this mutual aid work for the long haul. So that's something to look forward to. Hopefully you all will come. And before we do this, I want to invite Tamika, because I feel like you have. Hear you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
There you go.
My bad. I was like, dang, I did not mean to cut us off like that. That was rude and abrupt. Sorry. I was trying to be on my tech game.
You're great. You're doing so great.
Just some quick announcements for you all. Check your email. In the next 24 hours, you will get an email. If you register for the call, you will get an email for this webinar. You will get an email that has a bunch of follow-up resources. People were asking about books. People were asking about where can I find a map or more information about how can I connect to existing mutual aid organizations, the tools that Adaku just walked you through, the community mapping tool, the slideshow you will get in your email. So check your email if you register for the training. If you do not register for the training, you have questions, you want to get the email, hit us up at organizing@womensmarch.com. Now, I have just volunteered our organizing team to help manage this. My apologies. We didn't talk about this beforehand. But email us at organizing@womensmarch.com. There were a number of questions and whatnot in the chat. Some of those questions we can answer in the follow-up emails that you will get over the next couple weeks. And then some of them we will get to in the next training. Second thing, register for training number 2. The sign up for training number 2 will be out there tomorrow. You'll get it in that email, but you'll also be able to find it on all of our socials, on all of our, on our website and everything by tomorrow. So look for that, and please do register, because we want to make sure that you get all the follow-up materials. And that's the best way for us to get you the follow-up materials, and the best way for us also to get your feedback on these trainings and to help you get plugged in to the ongoing support and flanking infrastructure that we're building around helping y'all build your mutual aid projects. And then the last announcement I want to make is that there's a couple save the date situations. One, I saw some people post in the chat early in the webinar. Good Trouble Lives On Day, John Lewis Day, July 17th. You can go to our map. You can go to our website. You can connect to some of the actions that are happening across the country. You can also go to our socials and you can get connected to the maps there. We will have our next digital defenders training on July 22nd. If you haven't been inside of those trainings, please get in them. They're phenomenal. Entry, like they're basic how to be online and combat misinformation and disinformation, deal with the algorithms, etc. So please join, stay tuned on our socials. Our team will be putting up the registration for that, but please save the date. And then the last thing is we will have another impeachment town hall with Free Speech for People and Representative Al Green on July 31st. The information will also be on our socials, but save the date, July 31st. Join us. We'll be back in the building, back streaming on Facebook and YouTube. Another important impeachment town hall about what's happening with the impeachment process, what you can do to push for it. People are asking about San Francisco Bay Area, Oakland, etc. Go to womensmarch.com. You can find our map, our control shift map. for Good Trouble Lives On Day, there's also, if you Google Good Trouble Lives On, you will be able to get to the main site that has the big map with all the hundreds of actions on it. So please, if you want to organize an action, put your action up on the map. If you want to connect to an action already happening, that's how you find it. And so that's all I got. I'm gonna pass it. We're gonna go backwards. I'm gonna stay on here. We're gonna go backwards in our yeah, here we go.
Yeah, the last two. You're amazing. Appreciate you, Tamika, for bringing us together in all the ways that you do. Last chat question, y'all. What's one insight that you're taking with you, and what is something that you are sitting with? A curiosity that you're sitting with. One insight that you're taking with you, or a lesson that you learn, and one thing that you're sitting with right now, that you're holding with you as you move on to the next part of your day. Feel free to drop it into the chat.
And while y'all are doing that, I do want to again give so much thanks to co-trainers here, to Adaku Uta of Building Movement Project, to Carissa Vaughn of Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid Fund, of Katina Parker of Feed Durham. Y'all, phenomenal work happening across the country and just phenomenal leadership. So I just want to thank y'all again for being a part of this work and for accepting my invitation.
Always, love, always. And also to Risa, holding down the tech on the behind the scenes, getting it all here for us.
Yes, shout out to our digital organizer, Risa, who is phenomenal.
Yes. Oh, it's coming in. It's coming in. I see community mapping. Mutual aid is wide and varied. The need for clear decision-making, agreement process for the many decisions. Please go to the Good Trouble actions that are happening. I'm hoping to come to the one in New York. Mutual aid is not charity. It is empowerment and sitting with the eloquence and amazing work y'all are doing. So inspiring, beautiful, community-centered. Keep them coming. What you learn, what you're taking with you, and what you're also sitting with. And I'm going to close out with a poem from Comrade Rosemary Watola Tromer, which is called Safety Net. So let whatever needs to land with you from this poem, let it land where you need. This morning, I woke thinking of all the people I love and all the people that they love and how big the net of lovers. It felt so clear, all those invisible ties interwoven like silken threads, strong enough to make a mesh that for thousands of years has been woven and rewoven to catch us all. Sometimes we go on as if we forget about it, believing only in the fall, but the net is just as real. Every day, with every small kindness, with every generous act, we strengthen it. Notice, even now, how as the whole world seems to be falling, the net is there for us as we walk the day's tightrope. Notice how every tie matters. Thanks, y'all, for being a part of our net, for being a part of the circle, and for making sure that we do not leave anybody behind. Appreciate y'all.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.